Welcome. This is Stephen with Service Plus Solutions, and I'm here today with a conversation with David with Electrician Ed again. And on this topic, we have a 3-video series about dedicated circuits. And so I'm going to tell you dedicated circuits come into play when you have a specific electrical appliance that uses quite a bit of power. And there's a couple other reasons that may apply why you need a dedicated circuit. And so there's a question of, does this need a dedicated circuit? That's what we're going to dive into. Our 3-video series, this first video is going to be, what is a dedicated circuit? We're going to talk, what is it? Why is it important? And then as far as the code is concerned, which appliances are specifically called out to have a dedicated circuit. On the second video, we're going to go over, there's many other appliances that aren't specifically called out in the code that are going to need dedicated circuits. And there's a process to determine which one of those need it. So that's going to be in our second video. Our third video, we're going to go through a list of common appliances, and we're going to tell you, do they need dedicated circuits or not? I'll give you the punchline. Most of them, the answer is not yes or no. It depends. So there's more factors that come into play, and that's why we have electricians that were trained, and electricians can look into our code book and things that we're not sure about. But we can also assist you, not just in the safety aspect, which is what the code says, but also in the convenience aspect. We don't want you tripping breakers to have a nuisance or blowing fuses. We also don't want you to forget things as you plan maybe a kitchen remodel, the layout of your room and things like that. So all these factors go into play, and why we're, as electricians, we're here to assist you in the process. But these 3 videos on dedicated circuits will give you a good start, a good look into what all goes into play. So here we go as we jump into our first video of what is a dedicated circuit. Thanks. Welcome. This is Stephen with Service Plus Solutions, your local electricians, and I'm here again with David with Electrician Ed. And today we want to talk to you about dedicated circuits. So we're going to have 3 videos as part of this series, and in this first video, we're going to get right into it. So welcome, David. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Stephen.
So David, I think during your investigations for how to explain this, you found out that there's some terminology being misused or maybe just used differently. So what exactly is a dedicated circuit?
Okay, a dedicated circuit is a branch circuit that is well, first of all, let me explain that there is a little bit of confusion about the terminology. But the way that I'm going to be using it in this discussion is the same as an individual branch circuit, which is what the National Electrical Code calls it. And that definition is basically, it's a branch circuit that is only used for one utilization equipment, and only one. A utilization equipment is an appliance or a piece of other electrical equipment. It's something that uses electrical energy to perform a function.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that does that could be considered an appliance. But the individual branch circuit is only used for one appliance or one utilization equipment. And that's the definition of individual branch circuit. And dedicated circuit, that's normally what we're talking about, but sometimes it's not a technical term, dedicated. They could be if you hear somebody say it, they could be talking about a circuit that's dedicated to a room or several different things. They might even called the two small appliance 20 amp branch circuits that you have to have in your kitchen, dedicated circuits.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, and I'm not going to say that they're using that wrong, because the term dedicated is not in the code book. But it's just important to be on the same uh, terms when you're speaking to each other. Make sure that you understand what someone else is using when they say dedicated.
They're using proper English, but not proper
Yeah,
electrical code.
it's not as technical. So
Yes.
if somebody goes through the trouble of saying individual branch circuit, you know exactly what they're talking about.
Yes.
Uh,
Should
if
we
they
talk
say,
to homeowners like that, or should we translate it into English? I still go back and forth on this.
most people are probably, this is just going to go right over their heads anyway. They'll know what you mean, whether you
Yes.
use it um, exactly the same as an individual branch circuit, or if you say dedicated for specific equipment, because it's normally apparent in the context of how you're saying it.
So what we mean, as far as today's discussion, a dedicated circuit is for one specific appliance
That's right.
or one piece of equipment. So you're not plugging, and if that's plugged into a receptacle, then you're not plugging anything else into the same receptacle. This is
Correct.
completely dedicated for that one appliance or piece of equipment.
Yeah, I suppose if it was a receptacle, it could go where, that one could be unplugged and something else could be plugged in. And then it's
Mhm.
dedicated. It's an individual branch circuit that's for that new one that's plugged in. I guess you could make that argument too.
Yeah, but we're trying to be really narrow in the sense that
Yeah,
that
it,
one, whatever it is, goes all the way back to the panel with no other loads on
that's correct.
with it.
There's only
Okay.
one, yeah, one thing.
And so now that we know what we mean by a dedicated circuit, an individual branch circuit, what
Why
why
do
is
we
it
need them?
important? Why are
Yeah,
we even making this video? Which I'm going to have to redo the intro because it got to have some semblance of why it's important. Otherwise, they've already X'd out of this video, right?
that's a good point. Do you want to start over?
Now I'll go record it later. So why is it important from your perspective?
Um, so it's the reason why we have dedicated circuits is the same reason why we would have multiple branch circuits at all, instead of just having everything on one circuit. And some older houses did only have one electrical circuit, and that was fine for the time. But now our energy use has gone way up since the 1800s, and um, we we have multiple branch circuits in order to divide up the load and spread the load across more wires. Because the more current you have going through a wire, the hotter it's going to get. Um, so if you have more circuits, then that total load can be spread more evenly, and you have less overheating, less breakers tripping, less fuses blowing. It's safer, and it's less of a hassle. You don't have to go down and keep resetting the breaker. So that's why we have multiple branch circuits. Then the
Mhm.
reason why we have a dedicated circuit is we want to go a little bit further and take the really power hungry equipment and appliances that are in our house, that we use daily, and put them on their own. And that helps to just even out all the burden on the other circuits. So you give um, something its own dedicated circuit. Nothing else is going to be on that. It's the way to go with a lot of pieces of equipment that are um, what I call power hungry.
And so if that didn't land, then like David said, the reason why this is important, it's the same reason why we split everything into circuits. So um, we've been to some houses where people come and take wires and tap them off of the main breaker. It's a very bad idea if you don't know, especially if you don't know what you're doing. But you could have everything fed off of that main feed and everything would work. But that is not safe. And so that safety is really the goal of this whole conversation. Is you can have things that work, that doesn't mean that they're safe, and they won't work for very long if they're not done properly.
Yeah.
So why is it important that we have a dedicated circuit? Basically what you're saying is that certain appliances, loads, pieces of equipment, so we call them electrical loads, they just use a lot of power. And so it's important that we make sure that they're not in a situation that's going to cause a safety concern, and also a situation that's going to be inconvenient for the homeowner.
Yeah.
Is that more or less?
Yeah, I think safety and convenience are the two main reasons why we do this. Yeah.
So when we're talking about which specific appliances or electrical loads need a dedicated circuit, there are some that are specifically called out in the code. And
Yeah.
what are those?
Okay. Those specific things that are relevant for the homeowner. If you have any kind of a branch circuit that's not 15, 20, 30, 40, or 50 amps, so a piece of equipment or something that needs a different size other than those standard sizes that are listed in the code there, like for instance, a 25 amp breaker, that would have to be an individual branch circuit required by the code because it's non-standard. That's number one. And usually the only reason you have that type of breaker in your panel is because it was put there for a specific piece of equipment at one time, if it's not still attached to that equipment.
And what are the amperage ratings then again?
Again, there were 15, 20, 30, 40, or 50 amps.
Okay.
So if you have something that needs a 60 amp, for example, it would have to be an individual branch circuit. So an electric furnace. I think the maximum that you can use is a 60 amp per strip. So you can have multiple circuits going to that electric furnace, and usually there is. I think there might even be like 3 double pole.
2 or 3, some of them.
Sometimes. We're in Kansas, and most of the furnaces that we do are gas. Most people burn natural gas for that, but there are some that are all electric, and they go with the electric furnace. Okay, the next thing besides those standard fuse sizes is cord and plug connected microwave oven hood combo units. It's kind of a mouthful, but you've probably seen them before. It's over your range. You've got a hood, and as part of that unit, there's a built-in microwave. If it's cord and plug connected, if you have a receptacle behind it that it's plugged into, it needs to be an individual branch circuit. And by the way, an individual branch circuit with a receptacle needs to be a single receptacle, not a duplex or anything else, because somebody could come along and plug something else into that other receptacle on a duplex. So just because it's on one strap doesn't mean that it's an individual branch circuit. It has to be a single can only plug into one piece of equipment.
And so so when you say a duplex receptacle, you're talking about it's got 2 outlets.
Yeah, that's the typical thing that most people think of as an outlet or a receptacle outlet. We normally think of the duplex where it's got the 2.
And so if something needs a dedicated circuit, it should have an individual branch circuit. It should have a single outlet and not a duplex.
That's correct.
Receptacle. Okay.
That's correct. Now, you could take your microwave hood and you could put it, you could hardwire it right to that general purpose branch circuit. But there may be other reasons why you would put that on a branch circuit all by itself, an individual branch. Okay, the third thing I believe is fossil fuel fired central heating equipment. So that would be, you know, your gas furnace. It
Mm-hmm.
usually in our area, it usually takes a 120 volt circuit,
Mm-hmm.
and that should be on its own circuit. There are a few exceptions to that. They allow you to plug in some auxiliary equipment into that same circuit
Mm-hmm.
that that is related to the equipment. And
The
also
the pump, right? The condenser pump and stuff like that.
yeah, they would also allow you to put it on with an air conditioner. Um, pro, um, I can't see why you would do that, but I'm probably just missing something.
Some specific units or
Yeah,
something like that. Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe your furnace is 240 volt, and you know, so with a gas fired, the electrical use is just running a blower and the board that, you know, that controls everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it probably wouldn't hurt to have it on with an air conditioner if you had a 240 volt, but usually your air conditioners are 240 volt, and your blower unit on your air handler is 120.
Yep.
Okay, the next one would be, not everybody is going to have this, but if you have a boat dock, uh, if you have shore power for a boat, that
Mm-hmm.
receptacle must be a single locking 30 amp or bigger single receptacle, and it has to be powered by an individual branch circuit. It also has to have some other things like GFCI protection. There's a bunch of things that go along with that.
Yeah, so that's
That's
a really specific example. Hopefully, when people are dealing with unusual situations, we have the foresight to think, hey, there's something else. I probably need to check into
yeah.
what outside factors I'm not considering. And so, going through your list, there's a lot of them that aren't specifically called out for. And I just want to make sure we mention that on this video because we're not going to go into that on this video.
On this video, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have 3 videos. And so uh, hopefully I didn't interrupt your list, but basically most of the ones in a residence, in a house, are not going to be specifically called out for in the code, but there are other reasons why it definitely needs to be. Did I interrupt your list? Was there another one that was called out for?
I think I've got 2 more. Yeah, 2
Okay, go
more.
for it.
Um, or 3 more. Let's see. If you have an electric vehicle charging station, and that could just be a receptacle that's intended for charging electric vehicles. That receptacle, any receptacle that's going to be used for that, has to be a single receptacle, not a duplex, and it has to be on its own individual circuit. Hydro massage bathtubs have to be according to the code. And usually the installation instructions from the manufacturer are going to call for it anyway.
Hmm.
Um, in our discussion earlier, we talked about the difference between a hydro massage bathtub and a spa or a hot tub. According to the code, there's a difference, and that is that the hydro massage bathtub um, cir- it dispenses with all the water each, it cycles it out, it drains it out. With a hot tub or a spa, normally you just keep that water in there for
Hmm.
each use. And so that makes a difference with the NEC. They only require um, an individual circuit for the hydro massage bathtubs.
The code.
However, the code does. That
Yes.
doesn't
Hmm.
mean that there wouldn't be another reason, and we'll get to those.
Hmm.
Um, and something that I put in the article that I wrote for this, in a lot of the manufacturer's instructions that I looked at, they didn't have a single receptacle. They had a picture of a duplex receptacle, but they were calling for a GFCI protected individual, or they might call it dedicated circuit.
Hmm.
And that doesn't compute with me. It's got to be a single receptacle, but
Yeah.
you do have to do it according to the manufacturer's instructions. So that could be argued because they have that picture in there. And in the one I looked at, it was called dedicated, not individual.
Yep.
Okay, the next one is you've got an exception in the kitchen, and if you take it, it has to be an individual circuit, and that's the 15 amp exceptional branch circuit in for the refrigerator or other appliance that you want to dedicate a circuit to. Otherwise, you have to put those appliances on the small appliance branch circuits, which are 20 amps, but there are multiple outlet. If you do put your refrigerator on a 15 amp circuit, it has to be an individual branch circuit and a single receptacle.
Yeah, which a lot of people do have that.
Okay, and that's the end of the list. There's only 7 things that the code says, really spells out and says you have to have for there's other things for industrial and commercial uses, but we're not going to get into those.
Yeah, and so we didn't talk about our electric range. We didn't talk about our clothes dryer, water heaters, submersible pumps. There's a whole lot of things we didn't talk about that probably should have a dedicated circuit, right?
Yes. And that's probably, and a lot of times people say, oh yeah, you need a dedicated circuit for this. They're not talking about necessarily what the code requires, but, and we'll get into this, I think, in the next video, what the manufacturer calls out. That's very important. If the manufacturer says it, then that's the end of the conversation. You have to do it. But they'd be any large appliance that's going to use a lot of electricity just by themselves. You probably want them to be. And we could get into that list if you'd like, Stephen. That'd be like a room air conditioner. Even if it doesn't call it out in the manufacturer's instructions, if it's a certain size, it's going to probably need its own, or it's going to be you're going to be tripped. In fact, I was looking at a room air conditioner yesterday. It was 13 point something amps just in itself. So that's a pretty large part of a 20 amp circuit already, and it's a very large part. It's already past the 80% rule that we'll get into in the next video for a 15 amp circuit. And then I happen to notice that in that same room, they've got a setup for a game system, an Xbox 360. And that was at least 5 amps for the power supply just by itself. You put those two together, if you want to be cool while you're playing your game, you might be tripping circuits. So we'll see on that in that place.
Yeah, so basically what we covered on this video, what is the dedicated circuit? Why is it important? And then what's specifically called out by the code to have a dedicated circuit. And once again, many, many more things that we'll get into on the other ones that are probably more pertinent to the actual situations. But in our next video, we're going to go step by step. How do we as electricians determine what additional appliances need to have dedicated circuits? And a lot of this a homeowner can do as well. It's just simple math and just a little bit of investigation. So on the next video, join us on the next video where we'll talk step by step what additional appliances need to have dedicated circuits. Thanks, David.
All right. Thank you, Stephen.